Hi friends, today I am going to discuss one of the most important concepts in Java, that is constructors. Do you know what happens behind the scenes when you create an object in Java? Well, there is a special piece of code that runs automatically every time an object is created. It's called a constructor. The main purpose of a constructor is to perform initialization of an object. Let's see how constructor works and how it helps in initialization of object. Let's see in VS Code. Let's create a main.java file and we'll take a separate class as person class and we'll create a constructor. Constructor name and a class name should be same. So I'm creating a constructor and inside a constructor I'm writing a statement as person constructor. So this is a constructor. Constructor name and class name should be matched, and this is how constructor is being created inside a class. So how to invoke the constructor? Let's see. To invoke the constructor, we have to create a object. Whenever we create an object, the constructor is automatically invoked. So if I compile and run the code, it compiles fine. And if I run the code, here the output is person constructor. So the constructor is automatically invoked and the println statement is being printed. If I remove this and if I compile and run the code, now the person constructor is not being printed because we are not created an object. So the person constructor is not being invoked. So nothing is printed here. So if we create two objects, that is person P object and person P1 object. Here I have created two objects. So the constructor is being invoked two times. Let's see. If I compile and run the code, the output is person constructor and person constructor. Two times person constructor is being invoked. So how many times we are created an object, that many times constructor is being called. So this is how constructor works. But how the constructor helps in initialization of an object. Let's see, if I take the name variable inside a person class. So in order to assign the name, we use the constructor to initialize the name. So the constructor takes the name argument and assigns that name to person name. So here name is being assigned to person name. So for first person P, I am giving name as Ramu, and for second person I am naming as Pawan. So Ramu is assigned to object P and Pawan is assigned to object P1. So if I print the values P dot name, it prints Ramu, and if I print P1 dot name, it prints Pawan. So let's see, let's compile and run the code. It compiles fine, and when we run the code, the output is Ramu and Pawan. So for object P, name is Ramu. For object P1, name is Pawan. This is how assignment of the values to the variables happen using the constructor. So this is a parameterized constructor. So if the constructor, this is a non-parameterized constructor. If the arguments are zero, it is zero parameterized constructor. So for zero parameterized, we use just no para we doesn't pass any parameters. zero parameterized constructor. So I have created here two times an object. So zero parameterized constructor is being called two times. This is how constructor works in Java. Let's see some rules. Note, the main purpose of the constructor is to perform initialization of an object, but not to create an object. It performs initialization as we have seen. So let's see some rules. Rules of writing constructors. Name of the class and name of the constructor must be matched. So here class name is person. So constructor name should be person and these are case sensitive. So this should be exact match. If you take lowercase, it raises an error because this should be matched exactly. There should be an exact match of class name and constructor name. And see the second rule. Constructors cannot have a return type, not even void. We should not keep return type to the constructor. So here no return type is being specified and it doesn't return anything. Return type is not allowed for constructors. If you write any return type like void, it doesn't raise any error because it treats it as a method, not as a constructor. So it's not a good practice to take a method name as same as class name. So we should not keep return type to the constructors. So if I run the code, let's see, if I run the code, you may think that zero parameterized constructor may print two times, but it doesn't print anything. Just see, if I compile the code, it compiles fine. And if I run the code, it calls a default constructor that is provided by the JVM, which is not present here. So it doesn't call this thing because it is a method. It's not a constructor. So if I run the code, it doesn't print anything. You have seen here, it doesn't print anything because it treated it as method. If you remove the return type, now it treats it as a constructor. So let's see, if I compile and run the code, the output is zero parameterized constructor two times because we have created two objects. So this is how constructor works in Java. Let's see the next rule. The only applicable modifiers for constructors are public, private, protected, and default. Except these, all are invalid. These four only valid to use for constructors. So if you use final, it is not valid. If you use static, it is not valid. We have 12 modifiers, which I have explained before. From that 12, these four are the valid modifiers to keep for constructors. So let's see. Here it is a default, it is valid. So if we keep public here, now also it is valid. Let's see. If we compile and run the code, it is valid. So if we keep protected, now also it is valid. So if I compile and run the code, the valid output is being printed. But whenever we use private here, we can't create the object in other classes. Here, the constructor is private. So, private constructor is allowed only inside the person class. It is not valid inside the main class. So, it is not allowed to create the objects outside of person class whenever the constructor is private. So, the constructor person is not visible here. We can't keep, we can't create the objects outside of a class when the constructor is private. So only if we create a private constructor, private main constructor, zero parameterized constructor, which is of main class. Now, inside this class, we can create the object. So, here the constructor is private and the main object is created inside that main class only. So, now it is valid. So, now if I compile and run the code, it works fine and it prints zero parameters constructor which is of main. So, whenever the constructor is private, the object creation is allowed only inside that particular class only. So this is how private constructor works in Java. So we have seen how constructors works and rules of constructors. Thank you. Please like, share and subscribe for more videos.